tee boxes were really good. Knowing Jesus.
What?
Getting to know Jesus.
That's right. I know it was good, but I couldn't remember what it was. What? Short term.
All right, it's time for us to get started, and we're glad you're here tonight. Before we get into our lesson, we got Trey Terrific here. He's going to lead us in a song, so let's all stand as Trey leads us. That song fits in with what I'm going to talk about tonight, Trey. Thank you. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the time we have together tonight in the Word. Thank you for this day. Be with us this week as we live for you. Let our light shine. Help us tonight to learn a little bit more about Jesus. Help us, Father, to glorify your name and his as well. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Tonight we continue. We started a little three-part series last Sunday night, and we continue through this coming Sunday night with a little series that we've titled Getting to Know Jesus. And sort of get us in the ballpark where we need to be, let's refresh our memories on just a few things that we talked about last week. We used as our foundation for this lesson, or not our foundation, our launching pad for this lesson, some words of the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 3. Paul said, "Yet indeed I also count all things loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ." Paul was willing to give up everything. He was willing to sacrifice, to be beaten, to be pickled in the Mediterranean, to go through so many things. And Paul says, I'm willing to give it all up. And we talked a little bit about, well, what were some of the things that motivated Paul? And then I pointed out to you there are two things that he mentions specifically here, why he was willing to give it all up. Verse 8, for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ. Then in verse 10, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. We point out what's so interesting here is that Paul has been a Christian for at least 20 years when he makes that. And his desire was to continually know Jesus and to have a relationship with Jesus. And what we're discussing here is not a head knowledge, knowing some facts about just the story of Jesus, But we're talking about a heart knowledge of Jesus. And more in our lives, that should be our goal, that we become more and more in love with Him and have Him in our lives on a daily basis. And as we went there, we went to our foundation. And this is where we're staying tonight, last week, and then next Sunday night. I wanted, in doing this, I wanted to just go to one verse. And there are several we could have gone to. But I want to go to one verse because I thought if I went to just one verse, you remember it. And maybe you take something with you where you can really start to grow in a relationship with Jesus. And so this is the verse that I chose. It was a prophecy by Isaiah 700 years before the birth of Jesus. For unto us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. 4 names there that's given to Jesus, and I think if we could just really grasp a little bit about those 4 names, it'd help us to know Him a little bit better. No one deserves even one of those names, but Jesus deserves all of them. And so we asked last week, and we spent all of our time saying, okay, why? Why is He given these wonderful names? And Isaiah points it out to us at the beginning of the verse. First of all, He was human. For unto us a child is born. And then we notice the second thing He said about Jesus is that He was divine. Unto us a son is given, John 3:16. There's nobody else like Jesus. Nobody. He is divinely human. And now, if I could begin with that foundation, there's just nobody else like Him. Now I can begin to look at these names and see how He's the only one that could compare to these particular names. We talked about the divinity of Jesus and how that He claimed Himself to be God, and how not only did He claim to be God, but also the Bible claimed to be God, that He was God as well. So I hope we laid that point, and then we spent a little bit more time on this one, and that is Isaiah tells us He'll be the King to end all kings. And Isaiah tells us in verse 6, he says, and the government shall be upon His shoulder. And then in verse 7, he talks about this kingdom. He would have a kingdom, that He would be the King of all kings. And it would be forever. It would never end. And we spent time, if you'll remember, talking about that kingdom, going to seeing how that prophecy here in Isaiah 9 was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 4. And then beginning in Matthew 4, He began to preach the kingdom was at hand. And we made that study all the way through till the day of Pentecost. And we found after the day of Pentecost that now the kingdom had come. And it was talked about in the present. And here's what we concluded last week. Why can He be called these names? Because we can relate to the humanity of Jesus. If we get that, we see that He gets us. We can rejoice in the divinity of Jesus. There's nobody else like Him. And then we must respond to the authority of Jesus. All right. Now we want to go to the names. We're going to cover 2 tonight and 2 this coming Sunday night. Wonderful Counselor and Mighty God. I don't think that's by accident how that's put here in the text. I think Wonderful Counselor, and you look at Mighty God after that, it fits so well. And I hope I can bring that out tonight, because we've already pointed out, there's nobody else like Jesus, and there's no other counselor like Jesus. If we could grasp that and realize that the one we should always go to first is Jesus and His counsel, then we can start to build that kind of relationship with Him. Here's how I'll begin this tonight, introduce this. Every one of you will agree with me that's lived any kind of life that not a one of us will hit on all 8 cylinders in our lives. I mean, in every area of our life, none of us are strong in all areas. None of us. We all have our weaknesses and we all have our strengths. We know people who are good at business and they can make a business work. And they're magnificent business. But they can't make a marriage work. We know people who are good in raising money and making money. And it's just a God-given gift that they have to make money. But they're not too good in raising children. There are just certain areas in our life where we have our weaknesses and we have our strengths. Jeremiah said this in Jeremiah 10, verse 23. He said, "O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself." Now, I know you know this passage, but just let that sink in for a moment. "O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps." If I understand that, Jeremiah is saying there are just some things in life. We can't make every area of our life work the way it ought to work. And we need some help. And we need some counsel, okay? We all make mistakes. We all fumble the ball. We all say things we shouldn't say. And we all do things that we shouldn't do. And there are many reasons, I guess. If I were to throw it out there to you, we could give a lot of reasons why that happens in our lives. Sometimes it happens because we just don't know tomorrow, do we? We don't know what's going to happen 2 seconds from now. If we understood and we knew the future, we could save ourselves a lot of heartache, couldn't we? We could make the right choices. I mean, you think about it for a moment. We'd never run out of gas because we would know we were going to run out of gas before we did. Or we'd never break down on the side of the road because we would know we were going to do that. But that's not the way we're made. Not the way we're made. One of the ways is what we're going to talk about tonight. And that is one of the reasons we fall and we stumble is because we don't go to the right counsel. Too many times in life we find ourselves either following the wrong advice. Have you ever done that? Or we find ourselves not seeking the right advice. Isn't it amazing how that you see some people, and I know you folks would never do it, but how you see some people when they are seeking counsel and they're seeking advice, they go to the least qualified people. If you are having marital problems, it's just not a good thing to go to a person that's been divorced 6 times for marriage. It's just not a good thing. If you are seeking financial advice, it's just not a wise thing to go to a person that's got 14 credit cards and they're all maxed out. But sometimes in life, that's the way we find ourselves. Either we follow the wrong advice or we don't seek the right advice. Now that brings us, first of all, to the wonderful counselor that we're going to talk about. Because it's in Jesus that we have wisdom, and it's in Jesus that we have guidance. Wonderful counselor, mighty God. I like this statement. He is a wonderful counselor who gives us godly advice. This goes to that order that we see, and I mentioned a few moments ago of how this is listed. He is the God that gives us wonderful counsel. Now tonight, there are 2 things that we need to take with us and that we need to work on in knowing Jesus every day of our life. as we think about these two names. So let's get into it. Here's the first thing we should do every day of our life. We should know him as our marvelous God, wonderful counselor. I pointed out last week that about the little comma. Some of you may have the King James or the New King James. It'll have the comma between wonderful and counselor. And then in most of the modern translations, that comma is not there. It seems that when you look at it structurally and from the language itself, that grammatically they go together. He is a wonderful counselor. He's not just a counselor, but he is a wonderful counselor. He's not just wonderful, but he is a wonderful counselor. But let's look at these two words anyway, and for just a moment and think about them. First of all, he is wonderful. When you look at that word and you begin to study it, it means that he is, how would you put it? He is unique, that he's out of the ordinary, that he's extraordinary. This is not just any kind of counselor. We already know that. This goes back to his divinity. He is not just an ordinary counselor. That's important. Because unless I know how wonderful he is, and how unique he is, and how extraordinary he is, I won't go to him for counsel. Think about that. I mean, if he's just like any counselor that I could pay to go to, or some wise person that I could go to and talk to, he's no different. But he is a wonderful counselor. He's unique. I don't know. I make this statement. Maybe I shouldn't make the statement because somebody proved me wrong, and that's fine if you want to tell me afterward. But I don't know any time in the Bible that I can think of off the top of my head where Jesus asked for counsel. Now, if you think of one, don't embarrass me now. Just tell me afterwards, okay? But I can't think of a time, because why? He is a wonderful counselor. Actually, I was looking at that word, and it literally means wonder, what it means. And he is a wonder. Everything about the life of Jesus is a wonder, isn't it? We know about his birth and how that was a wonder. And we know that he was so wonderful that he would just go into common situations and with common people, and he would just transform it. The wedding there in John 2. Just an ordinary wedding that everybody, has and everybody would go to. But Jesus goes in, wonder goes in, and he transforms that occasion, doesn't he? You think about the disciples, the apostles. Jesus transformed them. They were just ordinary fishermen, people. We'd have never known about them if Jesus hadn't come along, but wonder came in, and wonder changed their life. Same thing about the storms. Just a regular storm. I mean, sometimes some of them are worse than the others, and maybe the lightning's a little brighter and the thunder's a little more. But boy, when Jesus comes in and he says, "Peace, be still," that transforms it, doesn't it? That whole occasion. Same thing with, someone dying. We die, we have a memorial, we're buried. It's the normal, it seemed like everyday thing. That is until Jesus came along and Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth." And wonder transformed that whole thing. With Paul on the road to Damascus, he's doing what he always did. He's putting Christians in prison and persecuting them. But, wow, Jesus came along there in Acts 9 and changed it. Look at his execution. Many people died on the cross. They were left on there many times for days on end, and the birds would come and do their thing, and finally they would be taken down and the bodies would be thrown in the valley of Hinnom to be burned. But then Jesus comes along and he dies on the cross. Things are different. He's wondered. Now, what I've been leading to is this. To me, one of the greatest wonders of all about Jesus is that I can have daily fellowship with him. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in trying to build a relationship with Jesus, in that we do not have and develop and work on this relationship with Jesus. Some of you who have been around for a while, you probably remember, I know you remember every sermon I preached. You probably remembered years ago I preached a sermon about bringing the awareness of the presence of God into your life on a daily basis. And I preach that sometimes when I'm preaching other places and whatever. There are a lot of folks in here, you haven't heard that. So briefly, let me talk to you about that because I think it's significant. One of the things that we need to do more and more to know more about Jesus and have Jesus involved in our life is to come to a knowledge of his presence in our life on a daily basis, to take him with us. And some of you will remember I talk about how we do that. We go through, we give him our waking moments. We think about him when we wake. We talked about you give him your waiting moments. We wait all through the day. We wait at traffic lights. We wait in doctor's offices. Why can't we give him that? Why can't we focus on the Bible? We give him our worried moments, our difficult moments, and our sorrowful moments throughout the day. And then we give him our waning moments. And I spend a whole lot more time on those points. But in that lesson, I point out this, and this is one thing I learned personally. I tried to practice that and put that into my life, and it works. It works. I don't know how many times in my ministry I'd be in a hospital and we're going in, and the people in the room have just heard the word terminal or cancer. And I don't know what I'm going to say. I know this is a bad situation. And I don't know how many times going into the hospital, I just look up to him and I say, Lord, I said, it's me and you, and it's mostly you, and I need your help. Please help me. I have these little one-word prayers and sometimes little one-sentence prayers, with him. That's okay, you can do that. I know you might think somebody's crazy, but I talk to him sometime during the day, just like that. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to bring the awareness of his presence into my life. Can you imagine what that does in the time of suffering, in the time of temptation, in the difficult times of your day? If you're able just to bring him in, can you imagine how that strengthens you? I can remember on many occasions, when I was a young guy, I thought I knew all about counseling, and I could handle people in their marriage counseling. And I finally learned, man, that's somebody else's business. That's not what you do. But I can remember people come in with marital problems, and I said, Lord, I don't know. This is a serious thing here. It's way beyond me. And in bringing God into that and ask him to help me into that. We need to be doing that more and more and more in our lives. Now, if you want to get knowing Jesus more and getting stronger, you learn to seek his counsel and bring him in, because that will change your direction. It will change your mission in life. It'll turn an ordinary life, folks, into an extraordinary life. He's wonder. But then he's counselor. He's a wonderful counselor. And I started thinking, why is he a wonderful counselor? Let me tell you what I came up with. A few things. Maybe you come up with some more. First of all, he made you and me. Made you and me. Now, I don't know, nobody else did that, has done that, will do that. He made me and you. Think about that. He knows your name. He knows every hair on your head, Jim. He knows every hair on your head, okay? Think about that. Think about what he knows about you because he made you. He knows what makes you happy. He knows what makes you tick. He knows the decisions you make. There's no better counselor that we can call on in our lives on a daily basis than the wonderful counselor. Another one is he's perfectly honest, okay? What is beautiful about when you look at his counsel that he gives us, he doesn't protect us from problems, does he? He just prepares us for the problems. There are a lot of things I don't know about sin I'd like to know. There are a lot of things I'd like to know about suffering that the Bible doesn't tell us. There are a lot of things about Satan I'd like to know that the Bible just doesn't tell us. But here's the thing, whether it be sin, Satan, or whatever it is, suffering, the Bible tells us how to deal with it and how to handle it. That's what I mean when I say he's just perfectly honest with us. And here's the next one. He gives divine wisdom. Why we ought to be seeking Jesus is because he never steers you wrong. He'll never send you down the wrong path. He'll always give you the right path. You see, some counselors you can go to, and they're good counselors. Maybe they've learned a little bit, and they can give you good advice. There's some counselors that may be a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more experienced, and you can go to them, and they'll give you better advice. And there are some counselors that may have a PhD and have they have done the studies and all of that, and they can give you the best advice. But only Jesus can give you the perfect advice. You see why he is a wonderful counselor? Now, how does he counsel us? How does he counsel us? Let's open this up for just a moment. And I wrote down two things. Let me see what you say. How does Jesus, okay, we call him the wonderful counselor. How does he counsel us? Through his word. Through his life and his actions. That's true. That's a good point. And that's a good point. Anybody else? Isaiah says, this also comes from the Lord of hosts, who is wonderful in counsel and excellent in guidance. Here's what I wrote down. First of all, the Bible, like Betty pointed out. Your testimonies also are my delight and my counselors. Every problem that you have on a daily basis can be solved if we would seek his counsel in his word. Every problem. That goes back to what we talked about a few moments ago, that he's never going to lead us down the wrong road. Here's another thing that I added, and that's godly people. If people are godly people, now I know you can go to people that are ungodly people, get some very bad advice, and ungodly advice, but if people are godly and Jesus is living in them, that's another way I think we can seek his counsel. Without counsel, plans go awry. But in a multitude of counselors, they are established. Now I want you to notice the order here. Notice Bible 1, godly people 2. Because here's what happens in our lives when we want counsel, when we're facing decisions in life. First of all, most of us, you know what we'll do? We will try to figure it out in our own mind. And we think, okay, we've come up with the right decision. And so we go for it, hoping it's the right decision. Now, if we don't do that, the second thing we do is to go to godly people, or people we know. And we seek their advice. There's nothing wrong with that. And then finally, if that doesn't work, and our life is just, we're in complete sorrow, and we've just lost it, and we're gone, maybe, just maybe, we'll go to the Bible. No. He's a wonderful counselor, and it should be Bible 1 and godly people 2, and maybe number 3, you, if you want to go there. I looked this up. I thought this was interesting. In 2020, there were 1.2 million behavioral health providers in the United States. 1.2 million. Now that included psychiatrists, it included psychologists, it included counselors, it included the whole package. 1.2 million in 2020. Now, I did a little more reading, and it seems like that number's gone down now in America. But here's the point I want to make. People have problems today. People have problems. We have 1.2 million mental health workers, okay? And we have a record number of people with all kinds of needs for counseling. Now, I'm not putting down counselors and psychologists and all that. Let me tell you, I know a lot of people have been helped by them, okay? As long as they get the right kind of advice and everything. So I'm not putting them down when I'm say what I'm about to say. But it seems like, and you know this, you look at the news, it seems like we're having more and more and more and more mental health issues. And we got all these counselors, and we got these psychologists, and we have the psychiatrists. You see, any counselor or mental health worker can give you advice. That's what they do. Any mental health worker can give you opinion. That's what they do. But here's the thing. They can be wrong. Right? But Jesus is the wonderful counselor. That's why first and foremost we ought to be seeking Him and knowing Him through this. Bringing Him into our daily life. And just having a little talk with Jesus every now and then. Think about this. I didn't mean to say this long on this. I'm feeling it, I guess, right here. I don't know. You can take any problem in your life that you created, any problem. And if you look at it closely, you know what you'll find? You'll find that in that decision-making process, you did not seek or you did not heed the counsel of Jesus. You think about it. I take it a step further. You think of any sin in your life. Any sin, anytime you have fallen and you have stumbled. And you look at that time, let me tell you, every time it will be, you can count on it, it will be in those areas where you were not following the counsel of the Lord. And somehow, some way, you were out of step. You see how this is important? We understand Him as wonderful counselor. Man, I got 5 minutes. All right, let's see what we can do here right quick. We also need to know Him as our mighty God. He's not just a good counselor. He's not just a great counselor, but He is a godly counselor. Mighty means warrior. It means strength and power. And He's the only one that way. He's the only mighty God. Only. You see, when Jesus came to this earth, He was not a man that became God, but He was God that became man. And what that means is that everything God is, Jesus is. Everything that God has, Jesus has. It means that everything that God can do, Jesus can do. If Jesus was not our mighty God, then He couldn't help us. He couldn't help us. That's what makes Him so unique and so different. You know, you go back and look at the quest for power. You go back at the beginning of civilization and you look at humans, and we've always wanted power. And we began with human power. Then through a process of time, it became horsepower. We learned to domesticate animals. And then after that, we got into steam power. And then after that, we got into electrical power. And then after that, we got into nuclear power. What do dictators want? They want power. Now think about this. People say we're the most powerful country in all the world. I don't know, sometimes I look at China and I wonder, but people say we're the most powerful country in all the world. And yet think about this for a moment. With all the power that we have in this country, we can't keep terrorists out of our country. With all the power that we have in this world, we can't stop an assassin's bullet. With all the power that we have in this world, we can't stop sometimes pink slips or bad x-rays. There's never been a more powerful country, and yet there's never been a greater weakness in our country. A good counselor will tell you what to do and maybe how to do it. But a good counselor can't empower you to do it because they're not mighty God. You see where that makes all the difference in the world? He is mighty. He's mighty in presence. He is omnipresent everywhere. He is mighty in perception. He's omniscient. He's all-knowing. He is mighty in power. He's omnipotent. And what he wants to do in your life and my life, when we're faced with decisions and we're faced with difficulties in life, he wants to take our hand and give us the power to get through it and do what's right. A mighty God that can forgive sins, defeat death, overcome Satan, and answer prayer can solve any problem that you have. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. Wow. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. And you know this one. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So, as I go out here this week, and as I make decisions, and as I have to deal with the things I have to deal with, work on knowing him. Work on taking his presence, the awareness of his presence, into everything you do. Okay? I promise you, you'll get to know him in a far, far greater way. And remember, the thing that makes him so special is that he is mighty, mighty. No other counselor can do that. He can empower you like no other counselor can. All right, you got 1 or 2 minutes here, and I know I did all the talking. That's just the way I am sometimes. Anybody like to say anything before we close? Okay, I guess I covered it all then. Next week, we'll look at 2 more names in a way that we should know him.